I still remember the exact moment I pushed my kitchen chair back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. The screen of my laptop cast a pale blue glow on my face, the silence in our small kitchen heavy all around me. 2 plane tickets filled the confirmation page. Round trip to the Isle of Palms, South Carolina, 2 passengers, my son, 8-year-old Finley Sterling, and me, Eleanor. The click of the mouse in my ears was a declaration. It's over, Eleanor. 3 years of living in the shadows ended today. 3 years ago, my husband, Victor Sterling, was declared dead after a senseless accident during a business trip. There was no body, just a hasty report and a death certificate handed to me by an official who had perfected a look of practiced pity. I remember that day like a scar that has never stopped hurting. I was standing in this very kitchen with Finley in my arms when a trembling co-worker of Victor's told me, "He's gone. I'm so sorry." I sank to my knees, feeling the world split open beneath me and swallow us whole. From that moment on, I lived like a ghost. I had loved Victor with an intensity that made me forgive his constant travels, the late-night phone calls, and the growing coldness in his voice. He would tell me he was busy, that it was just a phase, that everything would change soon. But instead of getting better, he simply disappeared one day. From then on, I swore I would live for Finley. I sold my wedding ring to pay off part of the mortgage. I got a full-time job at a local bank branch. I refused to rest. Every minute was spent trying to fill the void I saw in my son's eyes. Finley didn't ask about his dad much, but when he did, every word was a dagger in my heart. Today, when I bought those tickets, I wasn't just buying a vacation. I was buying a promise to myself to move on, to smile again, to teach Finley that life isn't only about loss. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for years. Finley came running in from the living room, a smile so big it lit up his whole face. As soon as he heard the word beach, he launched himself into my arms and hugged me tight. "You'll be happier there, right, Mom?" he whispered. I didn't know what to say. Maybe, maybe not. But I was sure this was the start of something new. There was a time when my life looked like it came straight out of a magazine. Everything was perfectly framed. The love, the career, the family photos on the mantle. Victor Sterling, then Victor Green, wasn't just handsome. He had that kind of natural charisma that made people lean in when he spoke. His quick wit could make me smile, even on the toughest days. I met him when I was 25, working as a junior analyst at a bank in Boston. He walked into the branch with a confident stride. He asked about mortgage options, though his body language suggested he knew exactly what he needed. By the end of that meeting, I was completely captivated, and he knew it. We got married a year later. In the beginning, it was the kind of marriage that made my friends sigh with envy. There were spontaneous hikes along the Appalachian Trail, dinners with red wine under the stars, and road trips just because. Victor was just getting into the world of venture capital and took off like a rocket. He quickly became one of the most talked about names at his firm. I felt proud walking next to him at company dinners, his arm around my shoulders, as if we were building something indestructible. Then came Finley, our miracle. I thought that would be the moment Victor settled down, trading late-night calls for bedtime stories and client dinners for family meals. But it was the opposite. He became even more absent. He was constantly traveling to close deals with investors in places I'd never even heard of. There were entire weeks when Finley barely saw his dad, except for a quick kiss on the forehead in the early morning. I'd pretend not to hear the front door close at midnight. I try to talk to him, first with tenderness, then with desperation. "Victor, you're missing his childhood," I said one night, standing in the kitchen, tears stinging my eyes. He hugged me, kissed my hair, and promised it was just a phase, that all this effort was to secure our future. And God, how I wanted to believe him, until the day he just never came back. At first, I thought it was another one of those trips he'd forgotten to mention. But this time, his phone went straight to voicemail for 3 whole days. I told Finley, "Daddy's busy, honey, he'll be back." But inside me, a dark feeling began to twist, knotting my stomach. On the 4th day, the call came, a supposed snowmobile accident in the northern Maine wilderness, formerly the Rockies. Thin ice, strong current, body gone. The divers couldn't recover him, they said. I remember holding the phone with one trembling hand while the other shielded Finley's confused face. I collapsed, thinking of all the missed birthdays and silent dinners. I buried an empty urn because there was no body. In that silence, I built walls around my heart, so high that not even Finley could reach me. On the morning of our flight, Finley woke up before the sun. He bounced around the house, his small blue suitcase rattling against the hardwood floor as he yelled, "Olive Palms, here we come." His enthusiasm was contagious. While he ran around, I checked the boarding passes and sunscreen. Everything was there, except the certainty that this was the right thing to do. What if I was overcompensating for an absence I couldn't fill? I shook my head. This wasn't the time for doubt. In the Uber, Finley rested his head on my shoulder, asking if they had popsicles. I watched Boston slowly wake up, feeling like everything was moving on without me, just as it had since Victor died. We arrived at the airport in the usual chaos. Finley didn't let go of my hand for a second. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't sadness or happiness. It was as if my soul was stretching, trying to remember what it was like to live without fear. Finley murmured, "Look, Mom, you can see the ocean from the sky, right?" I whispered, "Yes." From up there, everything looks clearer, even the decisions that hurt. When boarding was announced, I adjusted my strap. This wasn't just a trip, it was a leap into the unknown. When I saw Finley's eyes, so full of hope and so free of the past, I knew it was worth trying. The flight was full but calm. Finley pressed his face against the window, murmuring, "We're really going, Mom. We're really doing it." I smiled, stroking his hair gently. I tried to relax, telling myself this trip was to heal. But then I noticed it. Finley stopped looking out the window. His brow furrowed, focused on something down the aisle. "Mom," he whispered, tugging gently on my shirt. "That's Dad." My heart stopped. "What did you say, honey?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Finley discreetly pointed to some seats 2 rows ahead. A man was sitting sideways, talking to a young blonde woman. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses. But there was something, the shape of his shoulders, the movement of his hands, something that was so achingly familiar. I swallowed hard and forced a laugh. "Sweetheart, you must be mistaken." But then the man turned slightly, and my stomach turned to ice. There it was, that small scar just below his jawline. Almost invisible unless you knew where to look. A scar I had kissed hundreds of times in another life. Finley insisted, his eyes wide. "Mom, seriously. It's Dad." I couldn't breathe. I squeezed Finley's hand tightly, weakly stating that lots of people look alike, but my voice trembled, and he noticed. For the rest of the flight, I stole glances, watching how his fingers drummed on the armrest, just like Victor used to do when he was thinking. What if it really is him? The Isle of Palms greeted us with warm sun and the salty smell of the sea. It was a welcome change from the dry, cold air of Boston. Finley couldn't stop talking about how he was going to build the tallest sandcastle. I tried to smile, but my mind was stuck on that man, that face, that scar. When we got to the hotel, we were given a room on the 3rd floor with an ocean view. Finley let out a cry of surprise. That night, after Finley was asleep, I went out onto the balcony. The breeze was soft, carrying that scent of salt. I leaned against the railing, closed my eyes, and then I heard something. Voices. 2 people arguing on the balcony right below ours. Then I heard his voice, thick with frustration. "Do you ever care about anything that isn't money?" I froze. That cadence, that rhythm, the way he emphasized words when he was angry. And then a young female voice, defiant, answered, "Don't start with me, Victor. I told you from the beginning what I wanted, Victor." My knees buckled. It wasn't possible. I crouched down just enough to look without being seen. There he was, broad back, familiar arms. He was wearing a white t-shirt and shorts, barefoot. There was no doubt, Victor Sterling, my husband, the man I had symbolically buried 3 years ago, was standing 1 floor below me, completely alive, arguing with another woman. My first impulse was to run downstairs, to scream. But I stayed frozen, trembling, listening to scattered fragments of their fight. "Do you really think taking me to a cheap hotel fixes things?" she yelled. "It's a 4-star hotel, Serafina, formerly Camila," he replied. Serafina. That was her name. I felt a deep, sharp pang. Not of loss, but of betrayal. I backed away slowly, one hand covering my mouth to stifle my trembling. Inside the room, Finley murmured in his sleep. That night, a mix of rage and disbelief kept me awake. I needed answers. I tied my hair back, put on dark glasses, and went down to the hotel bar. The place was almost empty. And there he was, Victor, sitting alone at the bar, a glass of bourbon in his hands. He looked older, with new lines around his eyes and a weary air. My body moved before my mind could. I sat down 2 seats to his right. "Tough night," I said in a low, neutral voice. He turned his head, surprised, and gave me a tired half-smile. "You could say that." His voice cut through me like a knife wrapped in velvet. "Want to talk about it?" I asked, feigning disinterest. He shrugged. "Couple drama, you know how it is." "She just doesn't get me," he continued, swirling his glass. "She thinks I'm a boring guy trying to be young again." I glanced at him sideways. He was completely absorbed in his drink and his new life, not recognizing me. "And what would you like her to see in you?" I asked in an almost whisper. He let out a bitter laugh. "That I'm not just some guy with money. That I went through hell. That I'm trying to do better." He paused. "Forget it. You don't want to hear my tragedies." "I'm a good listener," I replied, my heart pounding so hard I could hear its echo in my ears. Victor sighed, rubbing his forehead. 3 years ago, I lost everything. I thought it was the end. I had to start from scratch, leave a lot of things behind. People. Not because I wanted to, but sometimes you just disappear. Disappear. That's what he called abandoning us. It hurt so much to hold it all, in that I felt my stomach was breaking apart from the inside. I stayed there, listening like a stranger, while the man who had destroyed my world shared his version of events. Victor drained his glass and stood up. "Thanks for listening. You're easier to talk to than most people." I gave him a tight smile back. He left, leaving behind the echo of an incomplete story. I felt that the truth was no longer buried. It was just beginning to emerge. The next afternoon, the sun shone and the sea breeze carried the scent of salt. Finley was digging in the sand with an almost sacred intensity, determined to build the strongest sandcastle. For the first time in days, I almost forgot about Victor. Then I heard screaming. Serafina, Camila, was screaming in desperation. I ran toward the sound. I saw her on her knees next to someone who had fallen on the sand. It was him. Victor was lying on his side, pale, with an arm twisted beneath his torso. He wasn't moving. For a second, I hesitated. He wasn't my problem anymore. But then I saw Finley, tense and confused. "Stay here, honey, don't move," I yelled, already running. I knelt next to Victor, noticing his shallow breathing and weak pulse. My hands moved on their own, drawing on muscle memory from a first aid course. I carefully turned him over, slightly lifting his chin to clear his airway. "He's breathing," I murmured. I covered his face with my towel and ordered Serafina, who was sobbing uncontrollably, to go get help immediately. I stayed there, kneeling on the hot sand, holding the wrist of the man I had saved. He groaned. His voice came out weak, barely a whisper. "Eleanor, Juliet." My entire body tensed. He had recognized me. "Yes," I replied in a low voice, with an edge I couldn't control. "It's me." His eyes opened and focused on me with difficulty. His expression fell apart. Surprise, fear, guilt. A hotel employee came running with a first aid kit. As Victor sat up, disoriented, he only looked at me. "Eleanor, please. We have to talk." I stood up slowly. "No. Not here," I said without emotion. "Tonight. 10 p.m. at the hotel bar." He nodded, still in a daze. I went back to Finley, who was hugging his toy shovel. "Mom, was it really him?" I knelt down. "We'll talk about it, honey, but for now, let's go back inside." Tonight, I would finally hear the truth, and I didn't know what I was more afraid of, that he had a good reason, or that he had none at all. That night, I arrived at the bar 10 minutes early, needing time not to run away. At 10 o'clock sharp, Victor walked through the door. He looked older, not just from the lines on his face, but from something in his eyes I didn't recognize. He approached cautiously. "Eleanor," he said in a low voice, as if speaking my name were a prayer. I just watched him, waiting. Finally, I let it out. "You have 2 minutes to explain why I buried an empty urn and spent 3 years raising your son alone." He flinched. "I didn't want it to be like this," he began. "I had to disappear, Eleanor. I had no other choice." I leaned toward him, not blinking. "You had no choice but to fake your death? To make me tell a 5-year-old boy that his dad was gone forever?" My voice cracked despite my efforts. "Make me understand that, Victor. Please, make it make sense." He lowered his gaze. "I was in trouble. Serious trouble. I borrowed money, a lot of it from people who don't forgive mistakes. And instead of coming to me, you staged an accident and disappeared?" I shivered. "I thought that if I stayed, you and Finley would be in danger. So I left. I cut off everything. I changed my name, my city. I paid back every single dime. And after you paid, why didn't you come back? Because I had already destroyed everything. Because I didn't know how to look my son in the eyes. Because I found someone else." My stomach lurched. "Serafina. That safe life you built while I was mourning a dead man." He tensed, adding, "I met her later. She doesn't know any of this." I leaned back, feeling a mix of disgust and sorrow. For 3 years, I woke up every morning trying not to break. I taught our son how to tie his shoes, how to kick a ball, how to write his name. I told him 1,000 times that his dad loved him, when I didn't even know if you were still breathing. He lowered his head. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I had to see you. I had to see Finley. I had to know if there was any tiny chance of fixing something." The tears came then, but not for him. For me, for all the days I had to pretend to be strong. I stood up. "You don't get to decide when to come back. You can't just show up and act like nothing happened." He stood up too. "Please. Let me be his dad again. I'm begging you." I looked at him, taking a deep breath. Every fiber of my being screamed to banish him. But then I remembered Finley's trembling voice asking if that man was his dad. I sighed. "Tomorrow. 11 a.m. at the hotel cafe. You can see him." He nodded, visibly relieved. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said, turning away. "This isn't forgiveness. It's a door left ajar, and you better not close it again." I walked out, finally possessing the truth, but it felt like the start of another storm. The next day, I woke up questioning if I had made a mistake by allowing this. Finley was excited, thinking we were just going for breakfast. When we arrived at the cafe, Victor was already there, drumming his fingers on the surface. Finley saw him and froze. "Mom, is that him?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, honey. That's your dad." Finley walked slowly until he was in front of the table. Victor instantly stood up and knelt down. "Hey, champ," he said, his voice trembling. "It's me, Dad." Finley stared at him, his lips trembling. "But you were gone," he said. The words got stuck in his throat. Victor lowered his head. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I made a huge mistake. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I only hurt you." Then Finley took a step forward and hugged him. A small, shaky hug, but real. Victor wrapped his arms around him, his body shaking. I looked away, recognizing that Finley had just gotten a piece of his heart back. They sat together. Finley started asking questions. "Where have you been? What were you doing?" Victor answered honestly, talking about long trips and mistakes. At one point, Finley lowered his voice and asked, "Did you miss me?" Victor swallowed. More than anything in the world. That was enough. Finley smiled and started telling him everything: school, soccer, the sandcastle. When they finished breakfast, Finley took his hand. "Can you come to the beach with us today, please?" Victor looked at me silently, asking for permission. I nodded. Just for today. The three of us walked to the water's edge, and for an hour, it almost felt normal. My heart was torn in two, happy for Finley, but shattered by everything that had been taken from us. When it was time to leave, Finley hugged him again. Can we see you tomorrow too?
Victor looked at me. We'll see, champ.
One step at a time. On the way back, Finley's voice was pure light. Mom, maybe he can come back with us. Maybe we can be like before. The door I thought was closed forever was ajar, and what walked through it could change everything. That night, I went out onto the balcony. A few minutes later, Victor tapped softly on the window. I let him in. It's incredible, he said in a hoarse voice. Finley, he's wonderful. I crossed my arms. He had to be. He only had him and me.
I know, and I'm sorry.
I can't give you those years back, but I'm here. I want to be here. You can't just come back and act like you didn't fake your death. I won't. I'm not asking you to love me. I know I lost that right. I just want to be his dad, even if it's just a little bit, even if I have to earn it day by day. I watched him in silence. He was no longer the man I had loved, nor the stranger from the bar. He was an open question. If you're going to be in his life, I finally said, it will be with conditions, whatever I want. You'll call before you visit. You won't show up unannounced. You won't promise anything you can't deliver. And if you ever lie to him again, you will disappear for good. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I swear I don't plan on ruining it again. I turned back to the sea. I'm not the same woman you left behind, Victor. I built a life without you. I rebuilt myself piece by piece. And you did it well, he said in a low voice. You're stronger than ever. I had to be. You made it necessary. I stayed there, my gaze lost among the waves. This wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a closed tragedy either. It was the truth, and that was enough for me. That night, when I lay down next to Finley, he stirred in his sleep and murmured, Mom, we're happy, right? I stroked his forehead and whispered against his hair, Yes, honey. We're happy, and we're going to be okay. For the first time in 3 years, I said it and believed it.